last on our agenda is another contested race, although there's, if I'm not mistaken, there's two people who are running against one another, yes? And then there's other water commissioners who are running unopposed. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
All right, so Water Commission, all of you come up, and I will say Kathleen Conti, Bill Costa, Patricia Vadney, Ed Ballard, and is Mr. Nunes here, Joseph Nunes?
No, Joe's working out of state.
Okay, so Joe is not here. And so we're going to do the same form. If you could just say a little bit about yourself, why you're running for the office, and then maybe we'll have a few questions for you. We'll start with Mr. Ballard.
Good evening. Ted Ballard. I've been around town since '73, and unfortunately, it's my 13th time running for election. I spent term as treasurer, 7 years as a moderator, 7 years in the DR school committee, and served 2 terms on the water commission. I'm running this time for a couple of different reasons. First of all, we're at a transition point from a water standpoint. How many people in town know where the water comes from? Comes out of the ground, right? Okay, there are 4,000 individual bedrock wells in Rehoboth, and maybe somewhere between 100 and 150 groundwater wells. Groundwater wells is out of the water table, what we call a water table. We've learned a bunch of things in the last couple, 3 years. One of them, we know that from an aquifer standpoint, there are 2 distinctly different bedrock aquifers in Rehoboth. Basically, north of 44 is one. That's on all one type of rock, solid rock. South of 44 is another, and that's in an old, hundreds of millions of years old swamp that when the continents came together, it was crushed, became rock. And it's a coal field, among other things. It's actually called a Pennsylvania Formation for that reason. It's a layer cake kind of situation. Some of the layers could be as small as a centimeter. The extension runs up, of that particular formation runs up into Mansfield. And back in the late 1800s, they mined coal in Mansfield out of a 40-foot thick coal seam. We know there are places in South Rehoboth where you drill a well and you find black stuff, which is a very, very hard coal. We don't know where that water comes from, except it's probably between the layers in South Rehoboth and between rock fissures of some kind in the solid rock structure in North Rehoboth. But one of the things we have working right now is I'm working with Everett Tozy, Werner Holberg, who had just left town, was retired from the Water Commission, Bob Ashton, and Dr. John Hermans, who lives up on Ash Street, and Jack's a hydrologist at Brown University. He's volunteered his time for us. We've had a little subcommittee going for about a year and a half, and some mention was made of the fact that Ed's been working on a update of the one of the bylaws affecting requirements that are being considered to be put in place to help address the issue of the town's requirements on low-income housing. But more important, we're working with the DEM. We have records of some of our wells in town. We lost a whole lot of those records many years ago when a water flooding situation wrecked them and they had to be thrown out. The state of Massachusetts has records for about 2,900 of the 4,000 wells. And not only that, over the past few years, they've turned around and put them on a database. And as of today, I've got an agreement with the gentleman who's running that facility for the environmental management people. And they're sending us a copy of the spreadsheet on a DVD. And one of the reasons they are is because they don't have all the data. When they input data, they neglected to put in a couple of simple things, like how deep was the bedrock, because land has overburden and then bedrock. In South Rehoboth, down along the Palmer River, the overburden is 100 feet deep. And down in the southeast corner, it's maybe 50 to 60 feet deep. You get up on New Street up by the red light, and you maybe have 5 or 6 feet. You get in North Rehoboth, and because all the ground is high and rock and things run off, on the high ground, very, very thin groundwater, and not because of the nature of that bedrock that's all exposed. You can't see the bedrock in South Rehoboth. North Rehoboth, it's all sitting there just under a few feet of sand. So, what we're looking to do is to map where all the water is. Take the database from the wells and their output, put it on the spreadsheet, and do it geographically, north, south, east, west, for every available piece of property, so that we can give the planning board, in their looking at things down the road, a better understanding of where problems are or may be, or at least give us some ability to plan. Right now, we have no ability to plan anything. So I'm looking forward in the next couple of years to working on that program and helping the state out, helping ourselves out. When Ed Bertozzi talked to him last fall, they were about to release that information. And I happened to talk to the gentleman, and he's a geologist, and since we've been working on the geology and understand it very, very well, we reached a point of agreement, and they're looking forward to working with us pro bono. Give us their data, we'll help with the inputs. In the meantime, we'll end up with information on where our water is, where it's coming from, but not necessarily how much is there. And one small thing on the Chapter 40B, the most recent one that went in, they forced a reduction in the lot size from 60,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet. And if you think about it, you have to have a minimum of 100 feet between the well and the septic, and that is also on adjacent properties. And there was no restriction in about the developer having to understand where the outfalls from the septic would go on the adjacent sides of their property and how it would affect property next door.
All right, Mr. Ballard, thank you very much. We have to, for the interest of time, we're going to move on.
But I just wanted to say, we're looking forward to getting some information on the table so that we won't have to ask the question, where does that water come from?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Next.
Kish Vadney,
Yes.
born and raised in Rehoboth. Proud to say I've been here longer than Ted. He was here since '73, I've been here since '63. But as you can see, there's just a whole wealth of knowledge to be learned to be on the Water Commission. And Ted, Mr. Nunes and Mr. Nicholas are very knowledgeable in that aspect. And every meeting I've been to so far, every time it's a learning experience. I plan to learn everything I could possibly learn and absorb from Ted and his wealth of knowledge in the aquifer. But my main concern is to maintain the aquifer and the natural resources for our future.
Very good. So you're running for a one-year term,
1 year.
and there are 2 slots available.
2 year, 1
And
year.
then you're one of 3 candidates running for that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Next.
Hi, my name is Kathy Conti. I worked in the municipality for about 15 years. 4 as the assistant town clerk, 11 as the town clerk. I've also served on Conservation Commission, Stable Regulations Committee. I was secretary to the Water Commission for a few years back. And I retired 2.5 years ago, and the reason I'm running is I want to continue to make a valuable contribution to the town. I think this is a very important commission, and I too am concerned and want to make sure we protect our natural resources. As Mrs. Vadney said, I have a lot to learn. There is a lot more involved here than I even realized. I believe Mr. Ballard and Tom Nicholson and Joe Nunes can give us invaluable information that we can draw from, and I look forward to working with them with your support, of course.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for running. And you're up.
My name is Bill Costa. I've been in town for about 26 years. When I first came here, I was asked to go on the health board, and I was on the health board for about 7 years until my job demanded that I must work more in Boston than traveling. My background, prior to that, 20 years, I lived in Swansea. And in Swansea, I was both on the health board, the conservation board, building boards of appeal, and also an elected water commissioner in town, which I served there. The aquifer in Swansea is the same thing, but the direction that Swansea went into was to become a municipal water developer. And they put in wells in the aquifer that were fairly deep because of the ground conditions, which were, they had a large reservoir to draw on. So they had, when I left, it was 4 well fields, and each well field was delivering over 1 million gallons a day out of it, supplying the town with drinking water. And since then, I spoke to Bob Marquis, who's the superintendent there, and they've done a desalinization system on the pond, on the river, which is good. There are also problems with it. Not to desalinate, you need chemicals to desalinate, and that stays in the water. My background is I'm a professional engineer, civil engineer. What I'm trying to do is come back into the town with what knowledge I have in the water distribution system, also in the well systems, and in the aquifer. And one of the things that maybe I thought I could help is that doing studies within the town, showing how much aquifer water is available on development, because there's only so much recharge within the aquifer from surface water that goes in, either from long distance or short distances in the aquifer. And as you draw that out, it affects everyone who drills out, as Ted was mentioning, that each well affects someone else as well. And the zone of influence on it depends. The deeper it goes, the larger the zone comes up to the surface and causes the water. In some of the old days, we found out in Swansea, was that when we put these big wells in to suck down the aquifer to supply these large things, a half a mile away, one of the farmers' wells went dry because it was a hand-dug well and it wasn't deep enough.
Really? Okay.
So those are the things that you have to consider when you're doing things. And also, one of the things, the second thing on the planning board, going for the 3-year term, is also to take the expertise that I know I was very fortunate when I was going to college in Fall River to be an intern with the circuit for a year. And going out and doing the research, going to the local towns and picking up all the building permits and determining where growth was by knowing where the open land is, how development can expand in those areas, and then utilizing that as projections of growth. And so that's what I'm trying to bring in and to help these boards.
Very good. Okay. So you need a little planning and,
Right.
you're running
Well,
the
even with the water, as a water commission, you need the planning
Yeah.
development, how it's going to develop, how,
Sure. They work
are
hand.
the needs there? Because you could have these lots, but they could be unbuildable because you can't get water.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. McKim?
I'm Bob McKim. Nothing has changed since I was up here 5 minutes ago. I could call my wife and see if she's still there. The Housing Authority position is open, and no one seemed to be stepping forth. And it's something that I am interested in, and I could learn. Mr. Horlbeck's the one that retired, and his shoes will be hard to fill, but I think I'm up to the challenge. It's a position where right now we might feel we're alone, but I can look around the room and with the help of the legislature and the selectmen, the Board of Assessors, the zoning board, if someone comes forth, and I hope they do in my lifetime, that wants to build housing or apartments, whatever, for elderly, veterans, low income, that we will be there to make sure they follow all the rules. And with all the help from all these other committees, we could have a fine job of getting someone the information and the help if they want to come forth and start. We do have someone that says that they want to use the school on 118, the old school, and we'd be loved to see someone come forth and use that and some of that land and make it available through housing for elderly, veterans, or low income.
And so your role would be, you'd be determining eligibility, amongst other things, you'd be determining eligibility for folks who want to live there.
Yes, and to make sure that all the rules and regulations are followed that's put forth by our legislature. And if we need, we can speak to the legislator. We have a fine gentleman sitting right here that can take care of our needs.
Do you folks determine eligibility in the
Yes.
the Horton estates?
Yes, I have not looked at any of the information that has been. I've spoken with Mr. Bradley, that's at the coordinator at the COA. He gets applications like that regularly, and I wouldn't dare look at them without being elected because it has a lot of private information,
Of course.
of people. And I've already spoke with other people on that committee, and as soon as the election is over, we're going to sit down and have a discussion as to who's going to be chairman and go forth with when we will have meetings and the things that we need to do to be in contact with all the other commissions in town.
Okay, very good. So in the interest of time, we're a little bit after 8. I said we'd be done at 8. That's not going to happen. We might, because we still need to get to our state rep. But I just have a few questions for, I'm going to try to keep this just to the folks who are running in the contested race, just to be fair. Although, you know, the others may chime in. And I just have a few questions for the Water Commission. And I think we asked these questions last year in a different way, but I'm going to ask again. Will you propose, or would you propose, or advocate any initiatives or studies for possible extension of municipal water on Winthrop Street from either Dayton or Seekonk, and if not, why not? So why don't we start with you, Ms. Vagne? You're running contested, so what's your feelings on that issue, if any?
I feel that we shouldn't really have public water, like, I just think it would diminish our aquifer, it would make a huge dent in it, like what they were saying about houses, too many houses going up. We've got a number of housing complexes in town that have already made some sort of impact on other people's wells. So I think if we had public water, I think not only would it cost too much to the town, that would be the biggest concern, the cost.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of ratepayers paying for it. I mean, so if you have ratepayers paying for it, and it's not coming from Rehoboth, it's coming from Dayton or Seacon.
The water would come from where though, I mean.
Well, where do they get their water?
Right, it would still come from ultimately our water source.
Okay, I disagree, but that's okay. We can disagree. That's why we're here. What do you feel?
Well, I'm not in favor of municipal water, obviously, but to be honest, I don't know enough about the particular situation you're talking about.
Okay, fair enough.
What I would like to do, though, is, if I was on the board, review all documentation that applies to that
Yes,
and make a knowledgeable decision from there.
okay.
Well, I look at it this way. What is the purpose? Is it a public safety purpose, or is it just for building homes? If it's for public safety, it's something different. But I don't know the particulars. I know in Swansea, they separated the water district from the town system.
Correct.
So that the water district is a separate financial group.
Right.
And it has no impact on the town per se.
They raise their own money.
They create their own money, they took out their own bond issues, and they set the rates, they did all the installations, they have their own repairs, etc. It's a separate entity, but it did set the value of small lots, but they still have the problem with septic systems. Septic systems didn't have a large impact on the individual wells because there weren't any wells.
Right.
Unlike in Rehoboth, the separation is really required because we try to position the septic system downstream from the flow of the aquifer.
Right.
So that it was always flowing away from the well.
So that's what I hear. I hear that having wells and septic systems is almost like a de facto zoning regulation because it's creating a certain kind of lot that we need to have in town.
Right, there's certain restrictions, and I think that when I was on Board of Health, the zoning board was looking at that, kind of shrinking down lots.
Right.
And I presented a report from the board that
So
showed that.
I'll pick on you as an engineer. Do you think it's better for the environment or for the aquifer to have 1,000 different artesian wells? Or is it better to have a well field in 4 spots servicing a number of homes? Or is there no difference?
No, I think the answer is you have to run a study.
Right.
You know, to look at both ends, to find out what happens to the aquifer by having all individual wells that are not always drawing on the aquifer at 100% of the time. Because if you have a well system, you know when the well comes out, it's not constant. It just builds up the pressure, puts so much into your reserve tank, and then you use it when you take a shower. Plus it kicks on, but other than that, it doesn't kick on.
Okay.
If you have a municipal well, that thing is going all the time. It's running all the time because it's serving everyone all at the same time. There's a big, so you have to run the studies on it.
Luke?
Yes, Mr. Bell.
Yeah, we don't need any study. And the reason we don't is because our situation is completely different from Swansea. Swansea, like Seacon and many other towns around, has a public water system where the source of the water is the groundwater aquifer. That means the aquifer that's in the dirt, not in the bedrock. So it gets replenished from rainwater.
Gotcha.
We had opportunities years ago to set up certain places in town to salvage places, areas like that. because you need a significantly different well field spacing. Swansea doesn't have one drill well as part of their water system. Every well we have here is in drilled bedrock, completely different aquifers, two different ones. And we don't know whether they get any recharge or not. So we don't know exactly where our water's coming from or how long it's going to be. So our charge basically is to try and excuse me, develop an understanding of that.
Okay.
And I remember back in the 90s when before we put the water district in, there's a big water study going on, and the answer that came out of that was that we had enough water in town to service the city of Providence. Well, that might have been partially true if we would develop taking water from the groundwater. But in the groundwater district, you put houses and septic systems. So when we're taking water out of the bedrock, the well has to be sealed so that there's no interference from the septic system. And they do that by grouting it. You know, you drill a hole, and you have a well casing that goes through the dirt, sand, and gravel down to the water. It's embedded into the rock about 15 feet or so, which is the state recommendation. And then they put a shoe on that, fill it with grout, stick it back in, the grout comes up and flows around it and seals the well. We don't have any specifications on that. The state has a set of recommendations. They've been going to modify those recommendations for many years. It's now sitting on a back bench. So that's one of the issues that will be on the table for us, was in our looking forward, how do we make sure that all those wells are sealed in the way they have to be? We don't have any specification. We rely on the well driller to do that.
Sure.
So we have a lot of things to look at. But the point is, our situation is completely different from all the rest of the towns around, because we're 100% or maybe 98% water coming from bedrock drilled wells, okay, which are pumped. Okay?
Very good.
So that's basically the difference in the issues.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
I know why I didn't go to engineering
Yeah.
school.
So that's one of the things we've been doing for the last couple of 3 years, is trying to get a pretty good understanding of where things are. And so
All right, does anyone have any other questions for the Water Commission?
I do. I'll try to make it brief.
Yeah, because we want to get to Steve. I want to be prepared to Steve.
Thank you. Mr. Costa, as you mentioned, quite appropriately, we need to have coordination of our efforts amongst the boards. And that's one of the initiatives that the EDC is trying to facilitate as well. The SERPED study, the Housing Production Plan, identifies barrier 3, the lack of municipal water and sewer limits development. The lack of municipal water and sewer limits development intensity and raises the cost of development. So as you mentioned, there's no municipal water or sewer service here in town. Housing properties must therefore rely on Title V compliant septic systems and on private wells that meet all state regulations as enforced by the town health department. New development could integrate alternative wastewater treatment facilities. However, this may not be financially feasible in small developments due to the high land cost imposed by large lot zoning here in Rehoboth. There are also often concerns about the impact of septic systems on water quality and surface water and groundwater bodies. While close attention to water quality issues is essential, it also contributes to higher development costs and serves as a constraint to development of a diversity of housing types and small lot housing. So specifically to the people that are speaking, that are running for the water department, water position. It seems that you're in direct conflict with trying to expand affordable housing here in Rehoboth with what the SERPED's Barry has identified. Can you speak to that?
Very good.
The reason I say no, because I don't have enough information.
I feel the same way. I don't
I don't have enough information on that.
So the future may bring technologies that allow us to,
That's one thing you have to assess,
right,
how the technology comes in, is it affordable? And it's to do. And we don't know.
And yes, I'm sorry, from what I understand, you're talking about a very expensive proposition there. And I don't know how the town of Freehold with it this time could even afford it.
Yeah, specifically what the study shows is that because of the zoning restrictions here in town, that's preventing affordable market rate rental and ownership units, and specifically to the water issue. So when we ask, are you receptive to bring in water, and we're asking the questions about affordable housing here in town, yes, we hope that in the future you'll actually have the knowledge to support the mechanisms and work together to facilitate the needs of the town.
If elected, I would definitely do the research to find out the answers to that. I certainly, I mean, these guys are so knowledgeable about just the research they've done in the last 3 years of this type of situation. Ted, as you heard earlier, is quite knowledgeable about all this information. And, like they were talking earlier about the school system, the Anawan school being put into housing. I know there we need to drill another well, and it impacts some of the surrounding houses that are there. But it can all be worked through. It's just a matter of finding the information that needs to be found to get the answers for it to happen.
very good.
And also, at the point, I introduced myself as Tish Vadney.
Yes.
On the ballot, it's Patricia Vadney, for those who vote.
Okay. Is it alphabetical? Because if so, you're out of luck.
Yeah, down the bottom.
I'm a Travis, so I know, we're done about it.
I can respond to the question of the 44 water issues in this way. If someone's really interested in doing that, they really need to understand where the water would come from. Would the water be available from Seacom? Would it be available from Dayton or Taunton or whatever have you, okay? You're looking at a state highway that probably needs to be redone. It's about 5.5 to 6 miles of roadway, and to install that pipe with plastic would be about $500,000 a mile. And if it were steel with the appropriate internal coatings that are available today, about $1 million a mile. That's just to get the pipe in place and make it available, and I'm sure that the thought process is for the commercial district, and that was what the original question is.
Sure.
And so, if that becomes an issue that wants to be brought before the town for any reason, the first thing is you got to find a source of the water.
And money.
And money. Okay. Now, in dealing with just a little side issue of why this whole issue is so important, there's 270 miles of roadway in town. If we were to have to put, for whatever the reason, completely do the town with water, that's about 125 million for plastic and 250 million or so, or 270 million or so for steel. At 125 million, at 5% for 30 years, that's about $6.5 million a year
Right.
tax cost.
You'd be better off buying cases of water.
So, my point being is that these are the issues that we're trying to bring forth and that we're trying to develop the data for. And the most important thing is to try and understand where the water's coming from right now. And to make sure that if we put in a low-income housing issue, if they reduce the lot size like they did on the most recent one, then the question becomes, is there sufficient water in that area to handle the higher density housing and the smaller lot sizes? the present 60,000 square foot requirement has been in effect since, I believe, 1968. Before that, it was 30,000 square feet. And back in the early 50s, and prior to that, it was about 15,000. And before that, probably about 10,000. And so as the density of town started to increase, the lot sizes were increased because of conditions and concerns of water. And a lot of people use the term, you know, snob zoning. It was really because the lack of understanding of where the water was and where it was coming from, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
That's where we
Bell.
are.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, panel. We're all set. Thank you for your time.